one person to help to see the light is former VP of Football Administration for the Eagles and Cap Guy, I think is the official name, Jake Rosenberg. Jake, thanks for taking some time with us today.
What's up, Jake?
What's going on?
Well, trying to see if you can help make us a little smarter as it comes to the salary cap.
Yeah. You think can you do that in 15 minutes?
To do miracles. Yeah. Clear up the misinformation.
So, Jake, you left the Eagles a year ago. Now you're a founder at a business called the Athlete Group. How has life outside the NFL been for the last year for you?
Life has been good. It's been an interesting change. I didn't necessarily factor winning the Super Bowl right after I left into the calculus. I think that was a hard one to process emotionally with the level of investment and ownership I feel, with this team and this roster and everything. I think I always felt like leaving literally straight from the stadium after the last game would probably be a better approach than staying through free agency and the draft. That made it a lot harder, but everything's been good. Just, I thought about the pivot for a long time, and there's an opportunity in college sports that I wanted to try to take advantage of and try to build a business and all those kinds of things. So it's been good and different, interesting, and, still bleed green.
Yeah, in all seriousness, I know you have to have some sense of ownership and pride in watching the team go out and do what they did this past year. Like you just said, you're invested emotionally, and also when it comes to structuring the roster or helping structure the roster with the personnel, you're heavily invested in that as well. So you have to have some sense of connection to it, right? Even though you weren't necessarily there.
Tremendous connection. I feel like this is my family. The players, the coaches, the staff. Spent more time with most of the people in that building than I did my own family for a really long time. And so tremendous connection. I learned that you could be 100% happy and 100% sad at the same time. I felt like missing out and not being there for this was brutal. And it was brutal for my family because they deserved, after 2 years ago, leaving that stadium in, absolute gut-wrenching, life-changing pain, they deserved, this ability to come back and do what happened here to the Chiefs. So, yeah, it sucks, and I feel bad that they missed out on that too.
Well, we do appreciate you helping us out with this. It's all good. It's all good, man. Yeah. I get it.
Believe me, listen, I'm 20 years removed, and it still sucks for me as a former player. So I totally understand.
I actually
get so many chances, no doubt.
When I left WIP in 2021, the Phillies went to the World Series, the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, and I was looking back at these guys. I was like, hey,
what about me?
Yeah, I'm up here with the Giants. What the hell are you doing? So anyway, so the NFL salary cap is generally seems pretty complicated to me, and I follow the NBA pretty hard, and I feel like I understand the NBA salary cap pretty well, and the NFL salary cap seems confusing to me. So if you don't mind, we're just going to fire some questions, and hopefully you can give some insight into how these things work.
I'll do my best.
Okay, so when a contract, and many of these might sound basic to you, but I think they sort of lay the groundwork because you understand at a very, very high level, and I feel like we're not even close there. So when an NFL contract has guaranteed money, that money is definitely guaranteed to be paid. The player is guaranteed to get that money. Is that money all guaranteed to hit the salary cap at some point? Whether it's 2 years from now or 5 years from now.
So hold on. The premise was wrong to start with.
Okay.
In terms of guaranteed money is not necessarily guaranteed to be paid.
Okay.
Guaranteed money is guaranteed to be paid in certain circumstances. There's certain money which is fully guaranteed.
Okay.
And you will see it listed as fully guaranteed. Though there are some circumstances where that money actually won't get paid, but we don't need to go into those permutations. But basically, fully guaranteed means you are guaranteeing a player in virtually all circumstances they will receive that money, and it's fair to more or less put that money in the bank. But then money that's guaranteed for injury only, which would be included in a total guarantee you might see, where you'll see listed, a total guarantee for a certain number or X as fully guaranteed. The total guarantee might include money guaranteed for injury, and that money really only prevents a team from cutting a player who's injured and not paying that money.
Okay.
So, in essence, if a player is completely healthy as of today and has a certain amount of money for this season guaranteed for injury, you can cut that player and that money would not get paid.
Okay. So then let's take the first number, the fully guaranteed money, the money that is guaranteed for the player to get paid. Is that does that money eventually hit the cap on some year?
So guaranteed money would only hit the cap as guaranteed money if the player is cut. That guaranteed money would be anything from $1 up to whatever their full salary is for that season. So if the player is not cut, the guaranteed money never even factors in. It really just is whatever they're making in a given season that hits the cap, if that makes sense. The guarantee really only protects the player from being cut. So outside of a termination, you never separately account for guaranteed money.
Okay, so then let's move on to the upfront money.
And feel free to, if some of this doesn't make sense, sometimes this is easier, on like a whiteboard or drawing it out, but I'll try to paint with words here to the extent possible. Well,
so I guess what we're all trying to get at is when, we'll see that a team will sign a player and the player will get a big signing bonus, right? They'll get a lot of that money up front. And I guess my question is that money, the thing that I'm trying to figure out is, does that money have to eventually hit the salary cap at some point?
Yes.
Okay. And
so every dollar here, the easiest way to think about this is every dollar that is paid to a player needs to eventually hit the salary cap.
Okay.
So the difference between cap charges and what a team is charged against the cap, or how the timing of that versus the cash the player receives, is just really a point of timing.
Okay.
So that's the difference in cap manipulation, cap numbers. That has nothing to do. It's a completely independent track from what the player is actually receiving.
That specific year. Or just in total?
Generally, period, the end.
Okay.
Yeah. There may be completely different. So your point about a signing bonus, the perception of a signing bonus is, okay, you've signed your contract and here's your money in the next, 15 days.
Yep.
So the reality of that is even the terms that the signing bonus is paid under are up for negotiation. You have certain situations with other clubs primarily where they may choose to put deferrals in a signing bonus even a year or more later. So a signing bonus really just refers to the fact that money is earned once the contract is signed. It doesn't necessarily mean that money is paid right away.
So then, I guess my question off of that, and I'm with you. I'm mostly with you here so far.
Good.
So
speak real slowly.
No, it's cool. And Jake Rosenberg with us, former VP of Football Administration with the Eagles, worked a lot with the salary cap with Howie Roseman with the Eagles. So then, a lot of what we have heard is that an advantage that the Eagles, for instance, have is that their ability to pay more money up front and swallow that sort of cash payment allows them an advantage in the salary cap somehow, in that that number
that's
is
not that's not an accurate
Okay.
depiction of what the Eagles' advantage is.
Could you are you able to correct that or sort of okay?
Well, there are a lot of advantages the Eagles have over other teams, and it starts with just strategy and I think gross intellect in terms of the way they attack the entire building of the roster. But in terms of the advantage in the way that the Eagles manage the cap, I would say in the biggest sense is that it is a strategic problem. Like there's nothing that are really beholden to every single year. It really is whatever fits the situation, whatever makes the most strategic sense from a strategy standpoint, will do. Whereas other teams really are very traditional and stick with a certain way that they do contracts, structure them. It may be the same exact structure they've used for 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, even though the circumstances have changed. And so what the advantage is primarily is most teams, a lot of teams, get a cash budget from the owner, and they back into that. They want to spend all the cash that their owner is willing to on the roster. Sometimes, based on the way teams manage their cap, they are limited in how much cash they can spend because they don't have room under the cap. And I think that the primary advantage, just from a salary cap perspective, of the way that Howie has built this thing, and obviously in partnership with Jeffrey and everything else, is that we manage the cap as aggressively as you possibly can to create max amount of space with every single contract to allow Howie to spend as much as Jeffrey is willing to on a roster. There really should not be a point in time where the Eagles are limited in how much cash they could spend because of salary cap. And most teams can't say that. I don't think that you've ever heard someone here say that we couldn't do something strictly because of the cap. I think there's a strategy involved and a positioning of all this, but it is a much more aggressive, free-forming strategic approach, and that's really it. I don't think it's that that we're willing to write bigger signing bonuses because, quite honestly, when you write bigger signing bonuses and you front-load contracts with cash, you're putting yourself at a strategic disadvantage in a lot of ways. One of the things about the league now is players are more likely to change teams than they were in the past, right? There's more trading, things like that. The more cash you've paid up front, the more penal it is to trade a player because they've already gotten a lot more of their money, if that makes sense. And so the best approach is always to have as flat an approach as you can, where if you do trade a player or circumstances change, less of that cash is walking out the door with the player.
That makes sense. That part makes sense. Yes, for sure. So, okay. So, two things. Can you explain how dead cap money works and why, if the Eagles were to, let's say Dallas Goedert, right? And I'm just looking at overthecap.com, just some dummy that's looking at the website and says, okay, even if Dallas Goedert is gone, then there is a cap hit from Dallas Goedert next year against the Eagles salary cap of $20 million. How does that work? And is there a way to erase that, or is that money always there? Like, I guess they could extend him and stretch that out, but how does dead cap money work? And then how does
right? So dead cap money is really just the other side where we discussed earlier that salary cap math is really just accounting, and it differs from cash. And so you can think of dead cap as the money that has been paid to a player already in cash, but has not hit the cap yet.
Right.
So the way that their strategy with the salary cap is you're able to prorate, you're able to extend or divide out payments so that they hit the cap less this year, and you could divide that payment, even if it was made right now, you can divide it over several years. So at some point when a player walks out the door for one reason or another, there's going to be parts of money that has already been paid to that player that are being accounted for in later years. And once that player is taken off your roster, that money would come into the current year, depending on the timing, the next year.
Got it.
That would represent dead cap. So it's money that has been paid to a player previously who's no longer on your roster.
And the money that has not hit the cap yet, that has to hit the cap at some point.
Correct.
Okay. And
is that money that had been basically budgeted or allocated to future years, but without that player on the roster, it now would come into a current year.
So is there a limit? And is that what a void year is? Can you explain what a void year is? Sorry.
This is hysterical.
Well, Jake, we can't just have you call me dumb for 20 minutes.
I'd be back. Yeah, at some point I could talk about Sparty basketball. But,
yeah, there we go.
But no, so a void year is you can only allocate money. You can only allocate charges to years that are on the contract, right?
Okay.
So for example, if you sign a player to a 1-year contract, everything you pay, theoretically, everything you're going to pay that player this season needs to also hit the salary cap this season. If you structure a contract that's really only 1 year, but it looks like 5 years when it's signed, you can divide certain things out over 5 years, right? Even if years 2, 3, 4, 5 are not intended to be real contract years. So there will be some type of little mechanism in the contract that says when you get to a certain date, and unless the world ends, you will get to that date, years 2, 3, 4, 5 disappear. So you get the benefit of stretching that money out without having to have a contract that goes that long. And then you also get the ability, if it's a 1-year player with a 1-year deal with a player who you wind up coming to a longer term legitimate agreement with at some point, that money those cap charges that are pushed out into years 2, 3, 4, 5 actually will stay there because there never is this void. You're never getting to this void part. So there isn't acceleration. That player's still on the roster.
Right.
And those cap charges still stay out into the future.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't throw this one in there, Jake. When we see numbers like, let's use the Eagles, for example. The Eagles, I don't even know if the number is actually real, but $22 million in cap space, right? What does that mean to the layman? Like, is that $22 million to spend, or how do you work that in signing players moving forward, your draft picks and things of that nature?
Yeah.
Is that really $22 million, or is that a number that can be manipulated?
Everything can be manipulated. I think that's the bottom line.
So
everything can be manipulated. I think for all intents and purposes, fans should probably not pay a whole lot of attention to what a team's cap space is it without having a significant amount of context
right
as to what that actually means or what underlies that. But if you think about, this is like we're advancing here in levels of cap understanding, I think. So this would be a little bit more, but if we talk about even on a 1-year deal, or you can take a bonus you pay and then divide it over 5 years, right? Even with, like you said, $22 million, whatever that number is, let's say $20 million because it's a little bit easier here. You can spend $11 million on a player right now, right? And if we say that a minimum salary for that player for that experience is $1 million, and you can divide a signing bonus by 5 years, that $11 million in cash you paid a player this season may only take up $3 million of salary cap space. Okay. So on your $20 million of room, you can fit at least 6 $11 million players. So you can spend $66 million on $18 million of space in that simplistic example.
So essentially what you're saying, if I can dumb it down for me and everybody else,
especially me,
from an Eagles perspective, your position is they're good at this. So any limitations we feel from their ability to obtain players is more of a cash limitation and how much they want to spend from a budget standpoint, and less about any precarious situation they are in with the cap that doesn't allow them to spend money.
I think that that's generally fair to assume. I also think that anything that is overly simplistic, that comes third-party media fan to some sense, is you're coming to that point with 1% or less of the actual information.
Right.
And so managing a roster you're managing so many different moving parts with different timelines, different perspectives. It's like you're just guessing on 99% of what's going into the decision. So yeah, cash is a factor. Managing the cap to some sense is a factor because you can't just go absolutely insane. There are things we've seen. There was COVID, and no one anticipated the salary cap going backwards to the extent that it did.
Sure.
So that would be a significant fly in the ointment. But otherwise, I think the message I would say, no one is better at this than the Philadelphia Eagles. No one's more aggressive and trying to win more, and having worked there for as long as I did and be as involved in this. And I think the narrative has evolved, thankfully, with 3 Super Bowl appearances in 8 years and stuff. But there is nothing that people in that building would not do to win, and it is pushing every single lever at all points to get to that. And that's really the point. I think they're as aggressive as one could possibly be to spend every dollar available to them. And I think sometimes this time of year with free agency, people lose sight of the fact that roster building is a year-round activity, and certainly until you get to the trade deadline, it's an evolving, dynamic process. And so people live and die the first week of free agency. More time and effort and thought has been put. Nothing that's happening is a complete surprise. And this process will continue all the way, into the season. And so let's stand back. Let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt. They certainly have earned it. And
Jake, we got to do a radio show here, man. I don't know if you understand.
Everyone could just chill.
So, Jake, then this is the most important question we're going to ask you, and thank you again for joining us today. So, Elliot Shore-Parks, who you may know, who covers the Eagles for us, we love Elliot a lot. A few weeks ago, Elliot said on his podcast that because he has covered, Howie and the Eagles for so long and seen what they did with the salary cap and so on and so forth, if he was hired right now as an NFL general manager, he would be able to be good at the job. What do you think of Elliott's claim?
Oh, my God. Well, I would say that I think if you look at hiring around the NFL more recently, maybe he may have the requisite amount of experience. So
wow. Wow. All right, man. Well, we really appreciate you, man. Thank you for this. I feel like I heard a lot of things. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this. But your message overall, I think, was a good one and was a prescient one. And thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Appreciate it, Jake.
See you guys.
Yep. That was a lot there, man.
It was a lot. I was trying.
Listen.
When the first question is, well, the premise of your question is all wrong.
Yeah. I feel so dumb. Not that I don't, exude brilliance. I feel way dumber.
Well, it certainly made it crystal clear that you ain't walking off the street being a general manager anywhere.
No.
Yes.